There are men who raise their voice and no one listens. And there are men who walk into a room and the silence deepens. No titles, no shouting, no arrogance, just a stillness that commands attention. Not because they are trying to impress, but because they have nothing to prove. This is not charisma. This is not manipulation. This is presence. The kind that doesn't beg for respect. It draws it. The Stoics knew this force. They cultivated it not on stages, but in solitude. Not through charm, but through virtue. This video is about that force. The one that needs no words, because its roots run deeper than sound. You open your mouth, and no one listens. You try to explain yourself, and still, you're misunderstood. Meanwhile, others walk into a room and shift the air just by existing. What do they have that you don't? In an age where everyone is marketing themselves, where volume is mistaken for confidence, where attention is bought, the idea of commanding respect without speaking feels almost mythical. But it's real, and the Stoics knew its secret. To them, the loudest voice was not the one that echoed off walls, but the one rooted in silence, anchored in virtue. They believed that true power doesn't need to be announced. It's not in the pitch of your tone, but in the posture of your character. This isn't about manipulation. It's about transformation. This video will show you how to become someone others respect, not through tactics, but by practicing the kind of self-mastery that makes words optional. In the quiet halls of ancient Athens, and later in the corridors of Roman power, a peculiar kind of figure stood apart. He did not raise his voice. He did not seek attention. Yet people gravitated toward him. He carried an invisible weight, the kind you don't notice until the silence stretches, and you realize you're listening to someone who hasn't spoken. This was the ideal Stoic. To the Stoics, presence wasn't about being noticed, it was about being undeniable. And what makes someone undeniable is not their speech, but their essence. The modern world has confused presence with performance. We associate power with flamboyance, charisma with noise, and leadership with command. But the Stoics taught something dangerously different, that the most powerful person in a room is the one who needs nothing from it. True presence, according to the Stoics, comes from inner harmony. It's what happens when your actions, thoughts, and values are all aligned with logos, the rational order of the universe. This alignment produces a kind of moral gravity. People may not understand it, but they feel it, and they respond to it. The dual powers, external versus internal. Cicero, though not a Stoic himself, observed this clearly. He distinguished between external goods and inner virtues. The Stoics dismissed external goods as indifference, nice to have, but not essential for the good life. They believed that only virtue, the excellence of the soul, made life worth living. Epictetus taught his students that there is only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will. Now imagine someone who lives this, who walks through life untouched by insults or applause, unshaken by praise or blame. This person has no need to assert dominance. Their mere peace is commanding. Their presence says, I do not need you to agree with me, for me to stand tall. That's intimidating in the most profound way. Inner sovereignty as outer presence. The Stoics believed in the idea of self-rule, that the only true power is power over oneself. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, had the literal armies of the world under his command. Yet in Meditations, he writes not about war strategy, but about how to remain humble, patient, and disciplined. Why? Because even he knew, you cannot lead others if you are not master of yourself. This is the first secret of silent respect. You command attention not by seeking it, but by no longer needing it. When you stop chasing approval, you start radiating something rarer than charm. You emit authenticity. And in a world of masks, authenticity draws eyes like fire in darkness. Presence begins. In the unseen, Musonius Rufus told his students that philosophy was not for show, it was for living. He insisted that you could tell who a true philosopher was not by their speech, but by their posture, their habits, their way of eating, walking, being. He said, "It is not the man who talks the most who is most philosophical, but the one who acts the most philosophically." This is why the Stoic presence is so powerful. It's felt before it's spoken. It's in how you sit, how you breathe, how you look at someone without flinching or judging. It's not a strategy, it's a byproduct of depth. So if you want to develop true presence, don't rehearse speeches, don't study body language tricks. Study your soul, sharpen your values like a sword, clean your mind like a temple. Hold your emotions like a seasoned sailor holds the wheel in a storm, firm, aware, calm. Only then, when the storm comes, and it always comes, will people look to you. Not because you speak, but because you are. In a time where everyone is desperate to be heard, the one who chooses silence becomes almost mythical. Why? Because silence, when chosen consciously, is terrifyingly powerful. It forces people to lean in, to question what you're thinking, to imagine the depth behind the stillness. The Stoics understood this long before social media turned the world into a shouting contest. To them, speech was not a tool for dominance, but a mirror of your internal discipline. Every word revealed the state of your soul, and if your soul was disordered, anxious, reactive, your speech would betray you. So they learned to speak with restraint, with intention, not because they were afraid, but because they weren't. The weakness hidden in over-talking. When you speak too much, you reveal something you might not intend to, that you're trying to convince, that you're seeking validation, that you're unsure, and words are your way of filling the silence where confidence should live. The ancient Stoics would have considered this a sign of internal poverty. Seneca wrote, "It is a great thing to know the season for speech, and the season for silence, and even more than knowing when to speak. The wise know why they speak, most people don't. They speak to fill space, to impress, to avoid discomfort, to escape themselves. But silence forces you to be with yourself. And most people fear that more than any audience. The quiet confidence of restraint. Imagine you're in a heated conversation. One person raises their voice, makes accusations, pounds the table. The other remains calm, makes few statements, and looks directly into the chaos without flinching. Which one do you feel drawn to? Which one feels in control? Silence, when grounded in virtue, radiates authority. It communicates, "I do not fear you. I do not need to defend myself. My life already speaks for me." This is why Epictetus emphasized the control of speech as a fundamental practice. In his discourses, he warned against idle talk and gossip, not just as moral failings, but as distractions from virtue. He said, "Let silence be your goal for the most part. Say only what is necessary, and in few words. Not out of repression, but as a training in presence, the art of choosing when to speak." There's a Roman story about a general who was asked why he spoke so rarely in meetings. He replied, "Because I only speak when my words are more valuable than my silence." This mindset turns speech into currency. You don't spend it unless the return is worthy. Every word becomes intentional. Every silence, a statement in itself. The Stoic does not avoid speech. He hones it. Like a blade that is kept sharp, not by constant use, but by careful maintenance and restraint. So when he speaks, people listen, not because his voice is loud, but because it comes from depth, not desperation. Silence in the modern world today. We are taught to build a brand, speak your truth, never stay quiet. But if you say everything, all the time, what will carry weight when it matters? Stoicism reminds us that words lose power when they are not preceded by stillness. Before you speak, ask, does this serve virtue? Am I reacting or responding? Is this noise or necessity? Every time you choose to hold your tongue out of awareness rather than fear, you build inner muscle, and in time, that muscle becomes presence. In short, those who talk less are not necessarily wise. But the wise almost always talk less, because they've understood the world needs fewer voices and more examples. Respect is often mistaken for fear, but true respect, the kind that doesn't need titles, uniforms, or threats, is quiet. It's the kind of respect that follows someone into a room without fanfare. That makes others straighten their posture without knowing why. That silences gossip. That makes even arrogance feel a little ashamed in its presence. The Stoics didn't chase this kind of respect. They became it, because for them, respect wasn't a goal. It was a consequence. A natural result of living in alignment with virtue. To understand how this works, we must break down what truly commands silent respect, the Stoic anatomy of presence. 1. Posture of the soul. Inner alignment with reason. Everything begins within. To the Stoics, the soul is like a city. If that city is chaotic, full of contradictory desires, uncontrolled passions, and weak foundations, no amount of speeches will make it stable. But if that city is ordered, if reason rules, if values are clear, if virtue is the law, then even in silence it emanates strength. Epictetus said, "If you wish to be good, first believe that you are bad." This wasn't an insult. It was a call to inner architecture, to face our flaws, rebuild our foundations, and construct a soul governed not by ego, but by principle. The person who walks through life with their soul aligned doesn't need to shout. They radiate clarity. Their posture speaks. Their stillness declares, "I know who I am," and when you know who you are, others begin to remember who they are in your presence. 2. Stillness of emotion, not reacting to provocation. One of the Stoics' greatest teachings was the distinction between what happens and how we respond. They believed that no insult can hurt you unless you agree with it, that no praise can elevate you unless you were already insecure. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." This isn't denial, it's dominion. A person who remains emotionally still under pressure communicates something ancient, that their center of gravity lies within. When someone tries to provoke you and you don't react, it forces them to face their own volatility. It makes them question their power. It reveals a contrast so stark that respect becomes involuntary. Imagine being in a room full of panic, and there's one person who remains calm. They become the lighthouse, not because they declare themselves as such, but because everyone else is drifting. That's the power of Stoic stillness. It's not passive, it's gravitational. 3. Clarity of action. Letting deeds speak. Talk is cheap. Even the Stoics knew that philosophers could be all words and no wisdom. That's why they emphasized praxis, living philosophy through action. Musonius Rufus declared, "The best way to learn virtue is to practice it, not talk about it." To command silent respect, you must be someone whose life proves their philosophy. You show up on time, you keep your promises, you don't gossip, you endure pain without theatrics. You succeed without arrogance, and fail without collapse. Each of these things is small, but in a world of exaggeration and performance, they shine like stars in a black sky. When people see that your actions align with your words, or even better, that your actions replace your words, they respect you without knowing why. You become predictable, not in behavior but in integrity. And nothing is more magnetic than someone whose virtue can be trusted. The echo of silent respect. So what happens when these three elements, posture of soul, emotional stillness, and clear action, converge? You become someone whose existence is a lesson. You no longer need to prove. You no longer need to explain. You no longer need to ask for respect. It follows you. Not because you chased it, but because you became the kind of person who deserves it, and let your life speak louder than your mouth ever could. It's easy to admire the Stoics from a distance, to read their words carved in marble, spoken by emperors and philosophers. But the real test is not in ancient Rome, it's at your job, at home, in traffic, on social media, in the thousand invisible moments where your character is forged or forgotten. The question is, can you apply Stoic presence in a world that rewards noise and punishes silence? Yes. But it requires a shift, not in tactics, but in identity. Let's walk through some ordinary modern situations and uncover how a Stoic would command silent respect today. Situation 1. The office confrontation. You're in a meeting. A colleague criticizes your project in front of the entire team. The room shifts. People glance at you, waiting. Most will either fire back defensively, laugh awkwardly, look to a manager for help. But the Stoic, they breathe, they remain still. They meet the critic's gaze, not with fire but with clarity. And then perhaps they speak one sentence, or none at all. Not because they are weak, but because they know restraint is strength. They're not playing a social game. They're anchored to something deeper. What does the room feel in that moment? Tension, followed by a strange kind of respect. Because someone just broke the script and didn't lose their dignity. Situation 2. Online conflict. Someone insults you online, posts a snide comment, dismisses your ideas, questions your character. Most people get pulled into the mud. They reply, argue, try to win. The Stoic remembers, you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. Instead, they delete the comment, or let it sit. They move on. Because to them, peace of mind is more precious than being right. This is not cowardice, it's courage and stillness. Seneca would have smiled at the entire scenario and said, "What progress, you ask, have I made? I have begun to be a friend to myself." The one who is at peace with themselves no longer reacts to strangers, and that serenity, it echoes. People watching quietly feel it, and learn from it, without you preaching a word. Situation 3. The social circle. You're among friends. Someone dominates the conversation, boasts, critiques, seeks validation. The old you might have felt the need to interrupt, to one-up, to retreat. But the Stoic in you simply listens. You nod. You don't pretend, but you don't compete either. And as the night goes on, people find themselves turning to you, not for performance, but for presence, because they sense something solid behind your silence, something they're missing. That's what true presence does. It attracts, not by demand but by depth. Situation 4. A personal breakdown. You're overwhelmed, deadlines, family, emotions rising, the urge to vent, lash out, or collapse. This is where Stoicism truly lives. Because the silent respect you project to the world is rooted in how you carry yourself when no one is watching. You pause. You write instead of ranting. You walk. You remember that nothing outside your mind can touch your soul. Marcus Aurelius faced plagues, betrayals, the death of children, and still wrote, "If it is endurable, then endure it. Stop complaining." These words are not cold, they are liberating. In the modern world, this is what sets you apart. Choosing calm in noise, choosing principle in chaos, choosing silence when others scream. You become the rare person who isn't reactive, and that alone in today's culture is revolutionary. The result, quiet authority. Apply these responses long enough, and something happens. People begin to treat you differently, not because you asked for it, not because you manipulated perception, but because your consistency carved a shape in their minds. You become the friend people call when they need clarity, the leader others trust in crisis, the partner who doesn't escalate, but steadies, not by pretending, by practicing. Presence, after all, is not a talent, it's a lifestyle. 1,000 tiny moments of choosing reason over impulse, virtue over vanity, stillness over spectacle. So here it is.
You've heard the ancient voices. You've walked through modern examples. You've felt the weight of silence and the subtle power of restraint. Now let's confront the core truth that the Stoics knew, the one that rewrites everything. You don't earn respect by controlling others. You earn it by mastering yourself. That's it. Not by being louder, not by being feared, not by collecting followers or titles or applause, but by becoming someone who no longer needs any of those things to know their worth. And that's why true respect is silent, because it begins at the point where you stop performing for it. The inner crown Marcus Aurelius ruled over millions, and yet in his most private writings, he didn't speak of glory, he spoke of duty, virtue, impermanence. He wrote, "Ambition means tying your well-being to what other people say or do. Sanity means tying it to your own actions. Respect, to the Stoics, was not something you win, it was something you become. And the moment you start living as if the world owes you none, you start receiving it everywhere. That is the paradox of Stoic presence. You gain influence by not needing influence. You inspire by not trying to impress. You lead by living what others only speak. What respect without words really looks like. It looks like the man who listens with full attention, not because he wants to speak next, but because he values truth. It looks like the woman who holds her gaze calmly when someone tries to belittle her, not in defiance, but in quiet knowledge of her worth. It looks like the leader who chooses to take the blame instead of shifting it, and in doing so, lifts an entire team. It looks like the friend who stays calm in your storm, not fixing it, not judging it, just being there, like a lighthouse. And yes, it even looks like the person who walks into a room and says nothing, but somehow everyone notices. That's not charisma, that's the echo of thousands of silent decisions, made in solitude, to live with virtue, becoming that presence. So how do you become that person? You don't fake it, you don't learn tricks, you don't act confident, you do what the Stoics did. You wake up early and reflect on who you want to be. You catch your anger before it escapes your mouth. You let someone else have the last word, and smile inside. You write down your principles, and follow them when it hurts. You accept pain as your teacher, and peace as your reward. And over time, you transform, not in the eyes of others first, but in your own. You begin to trust yourself. You begin to enjoy your own company. You begin to walk through life with your back straight, not from arrogance, but from alignment. And this creates something no one can fake, a presence that makes others feel more honest, just by being near you. The reward. And what's the reward for all of this? It's not applause. It's not dominance. It's not some imagined throne. The reward is inner peace, the kind that nothing can shake, not rejection, not failure, not even death, because you've built yourself on something deeper than public opinion, virtue. And in a world where everyone is shouting for attention, the one who has become quiet, truly quiet, becomes unforgettable. That is the Stoic secret. That is how you command respect, without a single word. If this message resonates with something deep inside you, that quiet voice tired of performing, consider subscribing, not for tips, but for tools to build your inner fortress. You want to be respected, don't ask for it. Become undeniable, in silence, in storms, in solitude, because the truth is people don't respect noise, they respect gravity, they respect the one who listens more than they speak, who remains calm when others panic, who chooses principle when it would be easier to please. You don't need to raise your voice, you don't need a better argument, you need alignment with your values, with your reason, with the kind of soul that cannot be shaken. Ask yourself, today, tonight, if I said nothing, would my presence still say everything? If the answer is no, then begin, silently, like a Stoic. If this brought you clarity or peace, subscribe to the channel.